Welcome to Halftime. I'm Doug Piper, and I'm a Halftime alumni from Greenville, South Carolina in the USA. This is our 48th Halftime webinar event, and I want you to know how much I appreciate you joining us today. Halftime is the world's leading peer learning center for successful people who are in transition. We teach, coach, and connect leaders who are looking for more meaning, joy, and impact in their next season. Now, please let us know in the chat where you're viewing us from and that the audio and video is going okay. So I had to pause there. Hopefully we're beyond that and there's none of that coming. So just let us know in the chat that you can hear us and see everything okay. Also, it's a great help if you'll vote in today's polls. We prioritize Pete's discussion based on your comments there in the polls. So just all you got to do is check off. You have 5 choices. We also have their future programs, and we want to know what you're interested in. So give us a check there as to which ones you're most interested in. Now, I also want to make you aware there's a few seats available in an upcoming Halftime Roundtable training. So if you just click on the green box there, roughly in the center, it'll email Lloyd for more information. Now, I think you're going to really enjoy today's event. It is called The Importance of Being Your Own Chief Life Officer, or said another way, the art of pursuing intentionality without insisting on the control. We're going to bring everybody up here on screen. Welcome, Pete and Lloyd. I'm especially looking forward to this discussion because, it seems like while many of us have learned to manage our businesses, our finances, and our calendars, and we do them strategically and intentionally, that's not always true of ourselves. So what if we managed ourselves in the same way that we do with this focused approach? Well, Peter Drucker actually wrote an article for the Harvard Business Review specifically on that topic, and he entitled it, Managing Oneself. In the article, he points to the importance of life mastery, especially in the light of our society's myriad of choices. Well, in the next 30 minutes, we're going to learn how Pete Chambers, the managing partner at Chambers Interests, practices the art of pursuing intentionality without insisting on the control. And then in the second half, Pete and Lloyd will answer your questions. Now, Pete has been living a life of intentionality for 20 plus years. He's an entrepreneur, a businessman, and a graduate of Texas Christian University. His career started at Chemical Line Company, now a La Hoist Group company. He then returned to studies to get his MBA and where his entrepreneurial drive really gained traction. Soon after moving back to Fort Worth, he purchased Diamond H Recognition. This is an employee recognition company, and under Pete, business was transformed into an employee engagement platform that is serving Fortune 1000 companies worldwide. Now, Pete is living out his mission to serve, lead, and connect leaders in thriving organizations and is a managing partner at Chambers Interest, which is a single-family investment firm. He and his wife founded a Fort Worth private award-winning school for talented but disadvantaged children. Pete first encountered Halftime while he was in his 20s and has experienced many blessings in the pursuit of his Galatians 6 creative best. And then recently, he partnered with Halftime Institute's founding partner, Lloyd Reeb, to launch the Halftime Institute's 100X Forum. So welcome, Lloyd and Pete. Lloyd, I want to start with you. Could you please explain more about what you mean, Chief Life Officer?
Yeah, this is kind of what we learned from Peter Drucker and from watching older, wiser folks that were leading very intentional lives. And it's the art of infusing intentionality into your life, but doing it in a way where you're not insisting on the control, insisting on the outcomes. And if you infuse intentionality into your life, but you insist on the outcomes, you become miserable. But if you infuse intentionality systematically into your life and you're open and flexible and you look for opportunities that come over the transom, then it blossoms into something that brings joy and enables you to really produce a compounding impact. And it's truly inspiring, if not breathtaking. One of the things I find interesting about that is the combination of intentionality and adaptability. It enables you to make a compounding impact over a long period of time because you're more resilient. And it's interesting that this is seen throughout the Bible. There are two tracks that run throughout the Bible from beginning to end, God's sovereignty and man's responsibility. And just like, Doug, if you were standing on the train tracks, and you know how when you look way out in the distance, it looks like the train tracks converge, but they really never do. And these two principles in the scriptures, they never converge. God's sovereignty is about, like John 15, I am the vine, you're the branches, but without me you can produce no fruit. That's God's sovereignty. And then turn a few pages over and Jesus says, hey, don't be this kind of soil and don't be that kind of soil that gets snarled in the comforts of this life and gets distracted, but be the soil that produces 30, 60, or 100-fold. And then he went on to say, lay up treasure in heaven where neither moth or robbers will steal and destroy your investment in life. So these run parallel. And if you and I can live in the tension of the art of pursuing intentionality without insisting on controls, then we find we're in a role of chief life officer. And historically, we've gone to work and our career kind of managed our time during the day. And then we came home and we took kids to soccer and dance. And then we went to church on Sunday. We watched some football on Sunday afternoon, and we're back at work on Monday. And now there's so many options and so much flexibility, particularly if you're in the halftime season of life. It requires a new skill set. So to frame up our conversation for Pete and I, here's some of the things we've been observing as characteristics of a chief life officer. Now, I'm going to run through them quickly. You don't have to write them down because we're going to send them to you after this live stream. But one is just a deep dependence on God for wisdom and direction. That's daily or silent retreats throughout the year. I take 3 silent days a year just listening, journaling. These are disciplines that help you, like the Bible said, I'll guide you with my eye. It's eye contact with God. That's number one. Number two is having a clear vision for the desired future in your life. Many people that I coach, when we start the conversation, I ask them, what's your vision way out if this turned out perfectly? And they are not clear. It's not written down. And then the third is having a written strategy to execute on that vision that's specific and measurable. And the fourth is that your calendar, my calendar and my finances need to reflect my strategy. You should be able to audit my calendar and my finances and see the implications of my strategy. And then the people around me need to be in alignment with what I'm doing and supportive of my plan, which means compromise very often. And then lastly, taking time for regular systematic review and agile redirection. This is what Peter Drucker called planned abandonment, abandoning things that aren't working and following the unexpected success. So that's a quick overview of Chief Life Officer, Doug. I know that's a lot fast, but I really want you to hear it played out in Pete's life. And Pete, you and I have been on this journey for 20 years. When we became friends, I had a full head of black hair. We met at a YPO event for young presidents, CEOs, and your little girls were 3 beautiful blondes, and today they're women. You know, they're amazingly talented women. One's married and is leading her own business, and you know, how did that happen so quickly? But I've watched you over these years at a very close level, living out these principles that I just rattled off, and take us into that journey. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, well, it's nice to be here with all of you. You heard my bio, so I won't go into that. But I always like to start off with, I sit here as a son. Some of you are wondering about how you should handle your children if you've been successful. And I sit here as a son an only son to the smartest businessman I know. He's still alive. My dad, who's 82 years old. He saw an opportunity in his industry and rolled it up and was incredibly successful. And and was also my best friend because I had three sisters, and my mom said, "You take him and I'll take them." And so I just had the great fortune to be in business meetings and be on the golf course or hunting with men my entire life. And so I've been brought up, and let's call it with the silver spoon. But I met one of Lloyd's friends in Charlotte, North Carolina, and pardon me for the language here. But there were days that I asked him, "Did you have a silver spoon?" And he said, "I did have a silver spoon, but it was up my rear end and turning." And there were days where that's the way I felt. And I'm so thankful for that, because as a successful man, my dad still had the discipline to make sure his son didn't get ahead of his skis, and he made sure I knew what the ground level was, and I'm so fortunate. But I also sit here today, now 54 years old, and have been through the cycle. I've owned my own business. I grew it. I bought it. I grew it. It was very successful, and sold it in 2017, which I never was on a podcast before I sold my company. So, the old saying goes, you look a lot smarter all of a sudden when you sell a business. But I really come from you also as a guy that's operated out of a fear of failure and a low self-esteem. School was very difficult on me. And growing up under a man with such incredible tools and strengths like my dad, as all of your children do, you've got to one day find out who you are. And unlike, I know all of you have done the same, but so I sit here as one that's just a typical layman sinner. You're going to hear some things that I've done well. I know I've done plenty not so well, but I stand here very blessed and honored to talk to you. But my journey with trying to figure out, what my dad had, which was success, a charisma and a likability factor within companies and a leadership factor. And yet, how do you also win at home? And how do you win with your wife? How do you win with your kids? And how do you stay somewhat healthy? And I was lost on that. It's not that my dad was a bad example of that, but we all have, my kids are going to go to counseling for something I'm doing wrong. We all have to figure that out on our own. And in my 20s, because of YPO, my dad was in YPO, and my mom was from Tyler, Texas. Someone told me about this man from Tyler, Texas that had kind of been thinking through this process. And that was Bob Buford. And my dad raised me to pick up the phone and call someone and go see him. And that's exactly what I did in my 20s. I picked up the phone. I stalked Bob Buford. Of course, he didn't answer, but he had the most amazing assistant that I've ever seen in business before. Sure enough, she liked my story and took me, got me into Bob. And I immediately in my 20s had a man that was thinking about how to take men through halftime. Well, heck, I was just in the beginning. I just kicked off. I was just in the first quarter. And I was just fortunate to have a man of wisdom speaking into my life like Bob to tell me how one might accomplish both winning with God, winning at home, and also winning in the marketplace. Because I was raised, and I think it's the only way you can be in the marketplace is to win. And so, Lloyd, I can go on, and you can ask me questions more about my upbringing. But I've just been very fortunate to, one, be groomed my whole life by my father to run his business. We sold that business, so I never ran it, but I was groomed to. And one day, as he was successful, not necessarily sharing with me yet, which was I'm thankful for, he said, "Go do what I raised you to do." And all of a sudden, I had to go out and figure out if I was capable of leading a business. And 20 years later, back to the Galatians, back to, the leaning on God and trusting in him that he would bless your business, being one, insecure, and two, educated now through people like Bob and Lloyd and my pastor on what success looks like with God. You work hard, but the results are in God's hands. And
So
I
Pete,
just lived my career that way.
You've got a note from Bob way back, that you've got that I think Doug can share maybe. But, some of the specifics that are helpful are, what did you learn? And then somehow you had the discipline to apply it. So take us into some of the things. This was what, 20 years ago or so, 17 years ago?
It's 2005, and I was 37 years old. And I think the value of knowing someone, and I just encourage you all to find someone that can speak into your life and ask you how do you want to finish. In 2005, I'm 7 years into owning my business. I'm 37 years old, and Bob's asking me questions on how do I finish? And how do I serve my life customers? And guess who my life customers were, which was so wonderful to me. He said, your customers are Rainey and your 3 children, your mother and your father, and your sisters, and your halftime peers. Like, he was already saying, you're called to do what I do. And he was encouraging me to use business as my platform, but to hold it out here, if you will, away from me, and not wrap my whole identity in it, which is so easy to do as a businessman. And he just immediately started talking to me as how God might use that if I were to execute on satisfying those customers. And he said, keep your business, but your business is just a stepping stone to doing something larger, which of course I didn't have the confidence to believe. But it's exactly what happened. And he basically called it in this letter in 2005.
So then that affected the stuff you decided in years subsequent. I mean, there was a time when your whole building burned down in your business, and you had the courage to retool and reinvent it. And then when you went to sell it, you were selling intentionally. And so give us a few more anecdotes for how the wisdom you gained from Bob and others started to play itself out, and you grew into being Chief Life Officer. It didn't happen right off the bat, but you grew into it, almost like the way when you finished your MBA, then you grew into being a talented entrepreneur.
So a lot of my life, I wondered if I should be in ministry. And in 2000, meeting Lloyd Reeb in Southern California, I found out that my business could be my ministry. I'd never really understood that. Even though I was raised a God first, business second, I didn't know it could be a platform for ministry. And so all I can say is Lloyd's book, Success is Significance, and I don't mean to pump Lloyd here, but I got to pump Lloyd here because that's why I'm here. His book forced me to sit down and say, what margin can you start carving off? So I am also a second generation. My dad was a successful guy. At one point in my adult life, around the age that this letter happened, I knew I probably wasn't going to go hungry, but I still knew that I had to, if I wasn't successful, I was a winner. I wanted to win. And so I was in business and I wanted to win. But I wanted to win with God first. So I had to start shaping my calendar and my staff to execute the plan that I felt God was calling me. And at the time, it was carve 10% off financially and maybe 5% of my time to give towards helping others. And Lloyd said, if your calendar doesn't reflect it and your wallet doesn't reflect it, then you must look in the mirror. And the book, Man in the Mirror, and really just, there's a lot of men that talk about these Christian components of life. God first, business second, or family second, business third, all these things. We all talk about that. And yet, are we living it at home? God's inside the building, inside the home with you and your wife, with you and your kids. He's in the office with you and your staff. And are you truly living out? I'm not saying I was perfect, but God sees exactly who we are. And my assistant and my wife now can see my calendar. And I've shown them my planning that I'd done with Halftime. And I had others around me could call BS on it, if you will. If one, it wasn't even in my calendar and in my wallet, and three, was I living it? And that is where the rubber met the road with me, is I had a life plan, a business plan for my business, and the calendar and my relationships had to align with that, and which ends up being your reputation. And we all know how fast your reputation can be blown up, and that's where the risk is.
So Pete, you have a yearly roadmap now that you tweak every December, and you send it to me, and I give you feedback, and I send you mine, and you give me great insights to improve on it. So, what I heard you telling us so far was you had a wisdom source or several. You paid attention to them, you pursued it, you put it into your strategy, you shared it with your team so there was alignment, right? These are a lot of the things that we spelled out just a few minutes ago in those big ideas of being Chief Life Officer. So Doug, is it okay, Pete, if we share some of your deepest,
Sure.
most intimate things that are up there about your roadmap? So,
Sure.
So take us into a couple of the big things here. Like you've got Rainey's dreams in there. Did you know what her dreams are before I asked you to fill out that box, or did you have to guess, or how did that work?
I guessed, and I thought I have a very good marriage, thank God. But I was wrong until we really sat down and she had a chance to answer the questions with me. No, I was wrong, and that box are her words. And have I sat down with her this year to see if those are still true? Not yet, being straight up, but those are her words.
Yeah, now
and
go
I
down
was wrong
just a little
before.
bit, Baird, with the tree, right there. That's good. The River Tree School. Talk about that, because right now you've got a platform for influence, which is your family office. And anybody that knows family offices knows that if you're managing a significant amount of wealth, it gives you cachet with other leaders. But you've got it designed in a way where you have a couple of very talented partners who are running the investments, but you're involved in a lot of the direct investing, et cetera. But then you put about a third of your time into this amazing school. So take us inside that. What's that like when you show up? What do you do? What does Rainey do? What does it feel like when you see those kids?
Yeah. And then, Lloyd, I'd like to go back up to my mission statement to start with that. And
Okay.
Doug, it just came off, I think, but maybe zoom back out and just go to the mission statement. I'll come back down because I'd love to share about River Tree. But my mission statement, the dream, and actually go to the roadmap, Doug, if you will, but the dream or the zone, being in the zone is when your mission statement works across all your metrics, all your perfect life, all your areas of focus. Let me put it that way. And so, Doug, I don't know if it'll work, but I know my mission statement, and it's to use my leadership experiences, my network, and my financial blessings to serve high capacity leaders in thriving organizations. Well, there's some key words in that, and I don't usually talk about my leadership experience. I just say I'm here to serve high capacity leaders in thriving organizations. Bob actually gave me permission to just use his mission statement. He said, I think you have the same one I do, but I couldn't do that. But what I love about my mission statement that works for me is that, one, it's to serve high capacity leaders. What that means to me is to not be one. It is so tempting, or it's nice when people say, oh, why don't you come run the company? You have all these great ideas, or come run this organization. Well, when you're struggling with ego issues or whatever, you might take them up on that offer. This mission statement protects me from getting into the weeds of the organizations. So one, it's to serve other leaders, and that is so fun. But it's without control, like Lloyd talked about, which, by the way, I'd never heard Chief Life Officer and without control till he sent me this document. So don't think that I've tried to design this around this podcast. But high capacity leaders. I don't have time. I love all levels of people, but I don't have time or the capability of serving all levels of people. I love and I admire, and for some reason I have a good relationship with high capacity thriving leaders, with high capacity leaders, usually with top positions in their businesses and wealth. And I just happen to understand some of their problems, and we share well together. And then in thriving organizations, again, whether it be profit or nonprofit, Chamber's interest is involved with both profit, nonprofit. we invest the same way in ministry and kingdom efforts, just like we do in businesses. And so I don't do anything. I don't act any different in my nonprofit world than I do in my profit world. It's all the same. It's just we look for great leaders. We come alongside of them. We serve them. We help resource them, and we try to get out of their way. And it's just a wonderful thing. So, other than just, of course, this sounds weird, but when I met Bob Buford and Lloyd Reeb, I said, I want to be like those guys. And sometimes that's how you find your purpose and your passion, by the way, is who do you want to be like? And that's what it was like for me. But there was no way I could become them because I had no story. So it took 25, 30 years for God to bring about the opportunity for Lloyd to say, Pete, why don't we partner together on 100X? But what I loved about Halftime is usually it's about, well, what are you giving back to? And River Tree is my venture capital effort, if you will, in the kingdom. It's a school that is in a neighborhood. It's a 1 square mile within our Fort Worth city. That's where I was born and raised. It's 2 miles from my house. It has the same issues as the ministry that we serve in India. And it's just so cool. I can be there in 5 minutes. I don't want to run the school. I am the chairman of the school, but I get to serve the leader, the head of school, to run a great organization. And I have no idea how to run a schoolroom, but the stuff she's dealing with is no different than the guys that we're serving in our businesses, and no different than the guy I was in my small business. And so it's just a blast. We have 95 kids. We're in our 6th year. My wife was part of we are not founders. We were part of the founding group, but my wife was just serving. She was the volunteer coordinator. She was coordinating 120 volunteers up there every week. And guess what? She wasn't getting paid, because that was the beauty of what I want. That was part of our margin program, is I'm going to make the money as our kids get a little older. She's going to give of her time and her brain, which is the brain of the family. And she has made a huge impact in that school. It got it to a point where she's like, now they need you, because they've gone through the founder stage and they need somebody to help them through the next phase. And, it's just been a God thing for us, but I can finally look at half-timers and say, yeah, I've got my thing over here too, even though a big part of my ministry is just talking to people just like myself, which I'm just a player coach alongside of Lloyd.
So Pete, you and I love the verse in Galatians 6:4-5, give careful thought to who you are and the work you've been given, and sink yourself into it. And then it goes on to say, each of us must take responsibility to do the creative best with our own life. And that's what I watch you doing, is this creative best of adding. So you've got a third of your time managing, the resources that God's given you, and then using that for generosity. And then a third of your time investing in leaders that are running this school and touching hundreds of kids' lives. And that gives your heart a boost, right? And then a third of your time helping the guys you and I serve through 100X forums. So the quick snapshot on that for those of you listening is that Pete and I created something that we don't promote widely, but it's part of the Halftime Institute, called the 100X Forum. And it's for 6 people every year that really want to be the soil that produced 100-fold, but they've been given incredible wealth and generosity. And so it's more focused on posterity and philanthropy than what the rest of our programs are. But you can see how it fits Pete perfectly. I can bring the experience and the expertise. He brings the credibility of running a family office and dealing with the challenges of having the level of wealth that they have. So Pete, rather than, because we're kind of coming to the end of our 30 minutes, let's spend a minute on the polls, and then we'll go to Q&A, if that's okay, Doug.
Sure.
All right. Yeah. Pete, let's look at the poll. I'm going to read the questions, give everybody a chance to vote right quick. So the poll is this: which one of the following is keeping or possibly slowing you from living a life of purpose and or intentionality? First answer is the necessity family changes that would be required. Next answer, I'd have to significantly change my work role. Next answer, I'd have to restructure my personal finances, i.e. burn rate. Next answer, I've not yet found a mentor or advisor that I trust enough to help me figure this out. Next answer, I'm too unsure about my purpose to commit to making the necessary life changes. And the final answer, I'm unsure about my relationship with God and or his purpose for my life. So we'll see which ones our audience is pointing towards, and would love to get some feedback from you, Pete, on these. So it looks like about 75% of our audience is focusing right now on personal finances. I'd have to restructure my personal finances and or burn rate, etc. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's one of the toughest things you do, especially if you've worked your whole life in your career, and all of a sudden you have finances. Your nature, your flesh wants to just enjoy that, and there's nothing wrong with enjoying your successes. But I would tell you, at all levels of wealth, a family that is intentional about what they're trying to accomplish and giving themselves away, if they have a heart and a desire to give themselves away, you're always going to have that challenge. It's never stopping. You're always whittling away. You're always looking at your cost of living. You're looking at, fighting pleasure and fighting isolation, which is usually at one of your places. And that could be, a trailer camper or a 20,000 acre ranch in Colorado. It's all spectrums. It doesn't surprise me that that's the biggest challenge, is restructuring our finances, because while we know it's right, it's hard to do. We might have to convince some family members to let some things go or to change our ways. Those are difficult, especially after you've told your wife for 40 years, we're going to work hard so we can do what we want. Well, all of a sudden you come on and say, hey, I talked to this guy named Lloyd Reeb, and now we're going to live with less and give away money. And, while that may be a great message, if you trained your wife the whole time waiting for her to be waiting for the nice car or the nice place, that's a difficult situation, and one that you should approach wisely and get somebody to help you think through it, because it can blow up the plan as fast as it can, put you into the zone that you want to be.
Yeah, and Pete, one of the things that happens in a family that my observation over the 25 years of helping people with this transition is, if you start by just taking a little bit of time away from your career. I took Thursday afternoons off back in 1992 for 6 months, and I started mentoring prisoners, and it touched my heart. And then I took a trip to the Philippines, and I spent a week working with kids that had nothing except flip-flops and shorts, and played basketball with them and encouraged them and told them about God's love. And little by little, what happened was my heart started to change, and we started finding more joy in the things we were doing. We realized that, Michael Card said, you can't imagine the freedom you find from the things you leave behind. And so we sold our farm in Canada. And I remember when I was 32, our kids were 8, 6, and 3. I came home to Linda and I said, hey, honey, I've been running the numbers. And you've heard her say this, Pete. I've been running the numbers. And if we live simply, we can live on what we have and do whatever God has for us to do the rest of our lives. And Linda looked at me and she said, Lloyd, how simple is simple? And so today we're 28 years into a 50-year experiment to live that out. But what we've watched is the joy level creep up. So instead of feeling like you need to give up stuff to follow God's call in your life, think in terms of trading up. And that's what we changed the vernacular in our family, from giving up to trading up. I remember after a sermon in China once, there was an old Chinese pastor came up to me and he said, Lloyd, remember, your calling is a gift to receive, not a goal to achieve. So imagine if you look at your calling like the privilege that Pete has had to work in investments and work in serving high net worth people and work in serving poor kids through the school there. it's a privilege, and the joy is actually, it sneaks up on you, and of course it's the way everything else God promises, it brings more joy than even the best 5-star travel. So, Doug,
I'll give you a stupid story, but I believe it. Time is oftentimes the hardest thing to give, but it's also can be the most rewarding. And I'll give you a silly story. Happened this week, but I honestly believe, because I know when the ball went in the hole. I made a hole-in-one this week at Seminole Golf Club. It's one of the historic golf clubs in the country. I make a hole-in-one, and
Gosh.
I don't play golf around Texas because I know I don't get to play with my friends as much as they play, because I'm either at that school or I'm at my office serving my customers, my family, my partners. But when that ball went in the hole, I just felt like it was God saying, I got you.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds silly, because the rewards are in heaven, but God will reward you for being intentional, for making sure that your priorities are on your calendar, in your heart, and you do your best to make those choices. And you pray for God for grace and for discipline and the energy to do it. And you ask him for forgiveness, and you ask your partners and your surrounding tribe for forgiveness when you fail. But it's the right thing to do, and it will be rewarded.
And Pete, I don't question that is God, giving you encouragement. And he does that. He encourages us. And that's such the sweet part of this journey of faith, right? I woke up this morning at 6:00. I got the Wall Street Journal out. Here's today's Wall Street Journal. I opened up the finance section, and on page B8 is a full 1/3 page article of two guys that came through halftime that I had the privilege of coaching. It's right in the Wall Street Journal. And it was my story today of God saying, stay at it. Stay with the game. It's changing the world. It's right there I put it on your driveway. I stuck it on your driveway for you to read, because I want you to be encouraged. And that is so cool. And so I just encourage you, get your eyesight set on being the soil that produced 100-fold. And then we'll celebrate together 100 years from now over a wonderful glass of Bordeaux.
Amen.
Pete, can I, as we summarize this, maybe some folks joined late, but when we look at being a chief life officer, could you sum up a few of the most important things that you believe could help us see the kind of progress that you've seen?
Yeah, well, one, I think the scriptures tell us how to live, and the scriptures can tell you how to be the chief life officer that he designed you to be. And it's the same for all of us in most cases. But then there's things that he brings to us through us seeking wisdom and insight, as the Proverbs talk about. But I just believe, one, it starts with your walk with Christ, your walk with God, your walk with his word. And it's amazing how that will flow through every side of your life, whether you think it's in the scriptures or not. He wants to bring wisdom and insight. He wants to solve the problems that you may be struggling with, wondering, what is your purpose, or am I being significant? I know I'm successful. I'm bored of my job, or whatever it is. He has an answer to that. And it may not come tomorrow, but if you set out on the path and you trust him, and you're patient, and you're humbly awaiting for him to get you moving, you put the effort forward, and he will meet you and multiply it. I believe it. But then write it down, share it with your spouse or a friend or someone you admire, and they'll pray for you. They'll call you, give them permission to call you out and say you're off course. Set measurable goals, and from there, good things can happen.
Good things
All
will
right.
happen.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Lloyd, this was fantastic. Pete, thank you. I know your schedule's super busy. Thank you for taking a few minutes to do this. Now, we're going to move to the Q&A portion of this. So we know if some of you have a limited amount of time, you may need to go. and we're just going to move right into the questions. But right before we move into the questions, Lloyd, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, just you can kind of see that there's a joy in doing this journey with others that you love and that so I mean, it's really hard for me to put words around it, but just the joy of watching, Pete's journey, watching his kids grow up and love God and follow him, and the love that he has with Rainey, and then to do life together. And I can't imagine anything better. So I encourage you to go on this journey with the people you love.
And speaking of that kind of thing, we also, if people will check the box down at the bottom, you can email Lloyd to look at some of our upcoming training, where you can actually learn the details in these trainings. So our first question is a little bit, Pete, along what you were touching with in your summary. And the question is, trusting God to guide you requires a lot of intentionality and trust. How did you learn to trust God to such a great extent?
I think I believed men like Bob Buford. I believed my mom and dad. I believed other Christian leaders that I came upon and said, it's not easy. It's confusing, but it's the best option. And it started, with someone saying, if you're lying in your coffin, and you're looking up, and what's God saying to you? I came here on second base. My parents are wonderful, and my dad was successful. I mean, I'm a blessed man. So I started well, but that sayings that questions God's gonna answer. What did you do with what I gave you? That hit me hard because I felt like I was given so much. I was like, shoot, it scared me to death. And then as I was laying in that coffin, there's a woman throwing a rose down on me, and that was my wife. And I know there's plenty of wives that are going to be saying as they throw that thing on USOB. But Bob taught me, I want to be holding my wife's hand, Linda, at that moment. And so I was like, gosh dang, I guess I got to finish well with her. So it's got to start today. I just started at the end and worked backwards. And God's just been so faithful, and I've screwed up so many times, but he's never changed, and he's loved me and forgiven me and just continued to give me great wisdom and great friends.
Well, I love that answer. And Lloyd, that is our only remaining question. Good. So I just didn't know if in summary you would go over the 6 points again, because I thought that really brought things home.
Yeah, for sure will. And we've just been, we keep enhancing how we serve people. So we've been distilling this over the years, and there's 6 big things that we observe. These aren't smart answers we came up with. These are observations. About a chief life officer, it's the art of pursuing intentionality without insisting on control by, number 1, deep dependence on God for wisdom and direction. That's a discipline. Every day, every year, time alone with him, journaling. Clear vision for the future that you want in a holistic sense, not just your career, not just your investments. A written strategy to live that out, to live towards that vision that's clear, measurable, and specific. And then your calendar and finances reflect, a chief life officer's calendar and finances reflect that plan. And then the people around you are in alignment and supportive of it. Otherwise, you're going to be chafing at it, and you're going to be causing damage with the people you want to love extravagantly. And then lastly, they take a systematic time regularly to stop and reflect and review and make adjustments. And if all you can do is make a reoccurring calendar appointment every December to relook at your roadmap and tweak it and send it to the people you love and ask for feedback, that would take you a huge step forward in this discipline and the art of being chief life officer.
Well, that was great. Again, Pete, we thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule. Lloyd, it's always a pleasure to do these each month. And the audience, we so much appreciate you taking your time in the evening to participate in our programs. And we hope if you're not already participating in some of the halftime programs, you'll consider joining one soon. So with that, Lloyd, good evening. Pete, good evening.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you guys so much. Everybody, good night.